Buongiorno, bonjour a mes amis dans l'écran. Siamo qui ormai a metà strada quasi del festival, o a un terzo del festival, che si chiama Change e che coinvolge Open House, il Maxi, l'Ordine degli Architetti di Roma. Siamo qui in mezzo al Covid, siamo in una condizione comoda, visto che abbiamo i nuovi rivestimenti delle sedie del Maxi, ma anche scomoda, perché muoversi in questi giorni nella società italiana, europea, mondiale è complesso, perché dobbiamo cercare di vivere, fare le cose che vogliamo fare, ma allo stesso tempo preservare la salute nostra e di chi è intorno a voi. Quindi dico a Jean-Philippe e Anne che vedranno una platea non piena come al solito, perché naturalmente dobbiamo rispettare limiti e regole di ingaggio in questi casi. Abbiamo invitato, Davide mi ricordava ogni giorno nel periodo, Davide Padè, nel periodo di presentazione di questo festival, che il nostro scopo è la sostenibilità. Io ero sempre un po' riluttante a limitare, o perlomeno no, semplicemente interpretavamo in modi ampi e diversi. Allora io ho sempre pensato che per la mia generazione, che è anche la generazione degli architetti che vedete sullo schermo, la miglior interpretazione di quello che un tempo chiamavamo lo zeitgeist, no? Lo spirito del tempo, di un tempo che ha bisogno di ripensare il modo in cui consuma le proprie risorse, i propri spazi, il proprio cemento, la propria aria, era proprio il lavoro di Lacaton&Vassal, cioè due architetti che hanno interpretato in maniera sempre abbastanza sovversiva dal punto di vista delle regole dell'architettura quest'idea di costruire edifici, spazi, luoghi, città, e però anche di farlo in un modo che andasse un po' contro l'idea dello spreco, della costruzione inutile, del fare quando si poteva anche non fare, eccetera. Jean-Philippe e Anne credo si siano conosciuti a Bordeaux durante gli studi di architettura. Anne poi ha continuato con un master in urban design. Jean-Philippe è nato in Marocco, quindi diciamo, porta già dentro di sé un'esperienza complessa, ampia, no? Mediterranea nel senso più ampio. Dopodiché sono entrati un po' nella nostra vita, nel nostro mondo, con una serie di progetti folgoranti, di cui parleremo adesso, all'inizio degli anni 90 e poi lungo gli anni 90, 2000 fino ad oggi. Anne è docente a Zurigo, Jean-Philippe ha insegnato in moltissime università, entrambi hanno insegnato in tutto il mondo e continuano a farlo. Non leggo l'elenco dei premi perché credo non sia essenziale. Il loro studio è a Parigi, ma la loro attività in tutto il mondo. E hanno vinto sicuramente, va ricordato che hanno vinto, è molto importante perché hanno vinto il premio Miss Van der Loo per l'architettura con un edificio non nuovo, no? Con un edificio che era stato semplicemente riciclato attraverso dei dispositivi intelligenti di riconsiderazione e trasformazione dello spazio. Quindi insomma sono per noi come dei maestri e dei compagni di strada allo stesso tempo. E non a caso sono stati in diverse mostre qui al Maxi, sono nella nostra collezione, sono dei riferimenti continui per quello che noi consideriamo un approccio intelligente all'architettura del nostro tempo, all'architettura del XXI secolo. Ecco, si può dire che Anne e Jean-Philippe sono fin dalla fine degli anni 80, dall'inizio degli anni 90, erano già nel XXI secolo, cioè in un secolo in cui l'architettura non è solo il lusso delle forme e del grande budget e della monumentalità, ma è anche invece l'uso intelligente degli spazi che abbiamo, delle risorse che abbiamo, degli edifici che abbiamo. Volevo innanzitutto salutarli, bienvenue, benvenuti, e poi cominciare facendogli qualche domanda. Loro sono architetti appunto che hanno una teoria immediatamente comprensibile e un radicamento nella realtà, no? Una specie di realismo intelligente molto forte, quindi penso sia bello anche, prima di dargli la possibilità di mostrare alcuni progetti recenti, di fargli qualche domanda su quelli che sono i milestones, no? Le pietre miliari del nostro rapporto con la loro architettura. Io vorrei cominciare con con una domanda che riguarda un edificio che non si vede spessissimo del loro lavoro, cioè la Maison La Tapie à Florac, la prima casa praticamente che hanno costruito, che è una casa, era una piccola casa esistente a cui loro hanno aggiunto una facciata staccata, trasparente, una specie di anticipazione della Fondation Cartier, direi, no? Vi hanno sicuramente copiato quando hanno fatto la Fondation Cartier, Jean Nouvel. Quindi, però ecco, non vediamo così spesso le case, le single family houses che fanno Jean-Philippe e Anne, e quindi gli chiederei di raccontarci, primo di salutarci come vogliono, e poi di raccontarci il ruolo che ha il progetto delle case individuali nella loro architettura. Grazie. Merci. I have to speak to you in English from now on. Sorry. Valentina è flessibile, ha sicuramente risolto. I will never speak Italian anymore in my life. Sorry, I apologize. Prego.
Sorry.
So the question is, what's the importance of single-family house design and the houses you built as an experimental, but also conceptual and philosophical kind of projects in your career?
It's okay. Do you hear? It's okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
We can say buongiorno Roma. And we are so sad not to be able to go to Roma, because it's so nice always. It's also always a pleasure to have a dinner and to have a good Italian wine. So very, very soon we hope to be able to come to Roma instead to stay in Paris. About the question, it is, I would say, when you start architecture, when you start working, it's always some little jobs, some little works that you have to do. But in fact, we really believe in this way of working. I think a house, it means step by step, room by room, space by space. So you start with one house, and then you go to 2 houses, and then to 10 houses, and then perhaps to 50 houses, and then you can, I think you at the moment you take care of one family, of 2 people, in a sort of very, very direct discussions with them. When you try to understand or to push them to give you their real wishes, then you can be really ambitious. And this ambition that you can have for one family, for a small house, I think then later you can have it for 10 families, for 50 families, for 100 families, or for 1,000 families. And it is always thinking of one that is, for me, extremely important. 1 multiplied by 100, 1 multiplied by 500, but never considering a building of 500.
Okay. So could we say that starting from the house for one family or one person, this gave you this sensibility to consider architecture as the result of the space plus, which is a word you like, the people, no?
Yeah.
So architecture is made by the people.
Yeah, sure, because as Jean-Philippe said, it's always the first projects that an architect can do. And we learned a lot, because probably it's working for a family or for a single house is a moment where, as an architect, we are the closest of people, of inhabitants. So, and of course, we were, for the first house, we were not really experienced. But we were so full of convictions or ambition or energy, but also we and especially we wanted to do for these people something extraordinary, and for us nothing could compromise this idea, because I think we were already very radical, not as a position, but as we people, because we wanted to do the best for these people, and also because at the time we had already the deep conviction that um, the quality of housing was mostly not very nice, not very good. And that is, as architect, it was our task, our goal to give our knowledge, what we have learned, our skills, how to develop something space much more interesting that would offer freedom of life, possibilities of appropriation. And for us, this was very strong, and we really wanted to achieve that. So we worked a lot, and we learned a lot. And today, this house is still our point of reference.
Great.
We always remind this house. We at every project we remind this house because it's a kind of generic.
Fantastico. That's fantastic. That's very clear. I want to tell the audience now about another important move you made. In 1993, I think, Lacaton&Vassal won a competition for an urban space, a piazza in the city of Bordeaux, Place Léon Hancock. La Place, it was a small piazza, a small place with trees, with a very nice little space in between. And after winning the competition, Anne and Jean-Philippe told the mayor, we don't want to do anything. We want to do nothing on this piazza. We want to use the budget to produce cultural events and contents to fill the space, no? the cultural void that was in the piazza. So they basically refused to put their signature, to put their form in the space because it wasn't really necessary on the thing. So I would like to. This is like a groundbreaking choice, no? It moved architecture to another moment, to another step, to another level from our point of view, and I think from their action. So I would like them to tell this story because we really loved it from the beginning. I mean,
yeah, it's perhaps the extreme point of our approach to architecture, which is to do the less as possible, to use the less as possible in order to propose the more as possible. And in each project, we try to deal with the less amount of materials, the less amount of steel, the less amount of glass, the less amount of concrete, in order to propose the maximum of air, of space, of light, because this space, this air, and this life, it is precisely what we need for life. And this, in any case, we are following this approach. In the case of the Place Léon Hancock, it was really that situation where it's also linked with a sort of poetic approach. It is a sort of what is really necessary and how we can really look at the places, understand the spaces, take time to understand what happens on these places. And we do like that. We went in the night, we went in the day, we went at different moments, and we find a sort of charm for this place. And we see that people, they are quite happy. They were playing bull, pétanque on the ground. They were sitting on the benches. And finally, after some very discreet questions, it came to immediately to our point of view that nothing was necessary. What was important, it is to think this place, this plaza is important. And by the time we spend to look at it precisely, delicately, and how we report about the situation of this plaza to the municipality, the place become important. So we say to the mayor, the project, there is a project. And the project, it says to do nothing. Yeah. It is not to say there is no project. No, there is a project. And the project is to do nothing. Precisely because we found that there was, the trees were okay, the benches were okay. We just asked to clean the place a little more than usually. And it has been accepted and it was fine, and we had a good fee for that. And but this is natural, and I think it's, for me, it's actually the how we should consider architecture now. It is like a sort of is there something to do, or is there nothing to do, or it's like if you go to the doctor and sometimes he says okay, but I think it's okay, you should not take any medicine, but and it's enough. So I think it's this very precise and careful attention to every space, every situation, in detail, with an extreme careful attention that is important.
Okay, so I remember...
Just to complete, it's also the way we think what doing architecture is. Doing architecture is not necessarily building. Is to start from a situation that is submitted to our attention with a program, and we think that our role is first to observe and to think to the situation, to the complexity, and to define which is the best response. And the response in architecture is not always building. Sometimes it's something else.
I completely agree. And also, I mean, in a more like ironic way, I would think that for our generation, this was very strong when there was this book by Bret Easton Ellis that was called Less Than Zero. No, this was 1985. So the project is less than zero, but at the same time, for me, it is not about minimalism, no? It's about, it's something completely different, is it?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of words with this question of less is more, or more is less, or less with more, or more with less. Okay, this is important, but what is important, it is less of what or more of what. If we say less money, we agree. If we say less materials, we agree. If we say less energy, we agree. If we say more pleasure, we agree. If we say more space, we agree. If we say more light, we agree. More life, we agree. More freedom, we agree. And this is the way how you use less as possible, you think more as possible to produce more as possible, but of things, it is a chance today that you have still some elements, some materials that have no cost.
Good, very good.
Light has no cost.
Yeah.
Air has no cost. Life has no cost. And normally we fight in order to say space should have no cost.
Okay, true, totally true. Now I want to go to a project that, I mean, we are in a museum. We are in a museum built by Zaha. The project was the end of the 90s. Museums where everybody's wish and everybody's desire in that moment of our life. But then you come out with a completely different project, with something that was reversing completely the idea of architecture of museum, which is a Palais Tokyo. Palais Tokyo is an incredible experience that has been in your life for a long time in different sections. And it was about an existing building, about the creation of space. It was about a different relation with curators, no? This was very important at the time. I'm sure everybody knows what Palais Tokyo is, but Palais Tokyo is this museum built, designed by Anne and Jean-Philippe within the old museum at the Trocadero, the Palais Tokyo. There was an old and boring museum. And they, in that case, they really did not add 1 centimeter of anything. They took away, they cleaned, and they created a completely different idea of space for exhibiting and creating, especially, art. So this is a story we really would like to hear from you.
In fact, we plan to show it in the lecture afterwards, but what we can say, which is really interesting, is also the context and the condition of the commission for this place, which is not a museum because there is no collection. It's only for It's an art center. But what was very, not new, but very different of a project of a museum as well, is that we were commissioned to sing to organize an art center in a space for as a temporary project. It was not done forever. It was, and in a way, it's very this question is very interesting. Not to do things forever, but to work for a while. But this while can continue as long as wished, and as needed. And we worked in that way. That's the most important because we had a space which was all demolished inside because it was an abandoned huge project of renovation. And we had a very small budget because it was supposed to open. We were supposed to open a very small space inside for a little contemporary art center for young creation. But instead of doing that, and after visiting the place, which is 24,000 square meters on 4 levels, the architecture was so beautiful, so interesting that in a way it was not necessary to do any more architecture, but just to recreate the conditions that this space reopened to artists, to exhibitions, and to the public. So we spent the 3 million euro we had to repair electricity, fire security, to reinforce the structure. And after we stopped as it was, because it's clear also that in a space of exhibition, all the exhibition, they also recreate their own environment. So it was not necessary to clean the walls, to make them white, but it was more important to give the maximum space open to the public. So we did it in 2 sessions. The first one we opened 7,000. Normally it should have been stopped after 5 years and returned to another project of probably a much bigger museum. But finally the state decided to continue the experience, and we continued this work of just giving the best conditions from the existing, because the existing had already an enormous potential. And in this case, the work of an architect is first to reveal and to understand which are the values of the place.
It was a strange story about the Palais Tokyo, because it was built in the 30s as a place for contemporary art for the state of French state, and it has been that function until 68 or 64. And the contemporary art that was inside went away because the Centre Pompidou was built. So all the art, contemporary art, went to Centre Pompidou. And then the occupation of Palais Tokyo was really more oriented with photography, cinema, etc. And more it becomes a sort of black box with no light, with very small rooms. And it loses a part of its character and its qualities. And when we had to work on this ruin that was inside, that was the conclusion of this former project that never went later, it appears for us that it was exact place for a sort of fun palace. This fun palace of Cedric Price, and the superposition of the fun palace inside an existing structure. And we find that precisely it was a place where we could have this crossing of seasons, programs, day and night, activity that would in fact linked with this space create the Palais de Tokyo. And less. So we just had to repair some points to make more, to give more strength to some columns, to find some filters to filter the light, and it was the minimum. But the reference of Tokyo was extremely strong. Of Fan Palace was extremely strong.
Yes, of course. When I first saw the second phase, I immediately thought of Piranesi, of the prisons, and that was another shock. But because I want to leave you the stage, I want to ask you a last question, and it's tied of course to the Tourbois la Prêtre à Paris, to the plus strategy. So the idea of the whole, every country in Europe, many of the European countries have to deal with this immense legacy of suburban, high density, low quality, problematic, socially problematic, urban-wise problematic buildings. And we are all striving to find a way to deal with this. And then Lacaton&Vassal came up with this plus strategy, so with the idea of not demolishing, not really redoing this building from scratch, but to work on them, to recycle them through intelligent, smooth, low budget, lot of air and light, as Jean-Philippe said, interventions. So this was another turning point for all of us. And in this, I mean, we did the Recycle exhibition here in 2011. The building was open in 2011, so they are like same age, children of the same age. So I think I would like you to introduce this, and then I will leave the stage, and you can speak without me interrupting you. Thank you.
Yes, about this.
Ve lo racconto io. There is a problem in connection. Parlo un attimo in italiano perché loro sono via. Immagino che tutti conoscete questi progetti. Sono una serie di progetti che cominciano da Saint-Nazaire, poi Parigi, poi altre città della Francia, dove loro hanno, come dire, ripulito le facciate di questi orribili edifici suburbani, diciamo post-Le Corbusiani, ma non belli come quelli di Le Corbusier, e li hanno semplicemente trasformato in qualcos'altro, aggiungendo come uno strato sulla facciata, no? Quindi le case sono diventate 20, 30, 40 metri quadri più grandi, più luminose, più aperte.
And this is becoming absolutely fantastic. So we want to work with that.
I'm sorry, we lost you for a couple of minutes. So can you do it again, please?
Yeah, no problem. No, I wanted to say that when people consider that some situations in the suburbs are wrong or make some problems, we have to be much more careful than that, much more precise, because in fact you have some parts that are not working and some parts are working very well. It's absolutely necessary to see that we cannot consider these slabs in the countryside, in the suburbs, like big gray rectangles in the landscape and think that everybody behind the windows is the same. No, we have to go inside. We have to see what is inside. We have to meet the people inside, and we have to see that if we have 500 flats, in fact, it is perhaps 3,000 rooms, bedrooms, living room that all are different with the objects, with the furniture, with the drawings on the walls that have been done during 20 years, 30 years, day after day. And this, we cannot forget that. And if there is some problems, we have to look precisely to the problems and solve the problems, but we should not take away all this richness. And then, instead of taking away, we have to add, we have to complete, we have to say, finally, these blocks in the suburbs perhaps they have the same kind of typology that some more luxurious blocks that are on the Mediterranean in Nice or Marseille that are looking to the sea with fantastic balconies. So perhaps if we have to add balconies, if we have to add winter gardens in order to propose views to the landscape, it is what we have to do. And then to transform some flats, some cells, some little boxes that probably have not been done in the 60s at the best they could be, but today it's time to make them at the best they can be. And for us, it is this element that is important. It is to prove that by adding a winter garden or a balcony that is 4 meters deep to each flat in front of these blocks, it is half time cheaper than taking them down and rebuilding them. And at the end, it will give you a situation that it is 2 times better than the one that we would have by replacing them.
Wonderful.
And with spending less money to give more.
Grazie. Je vous remercie. Je vous laisse I leave you the stage. I hope you're still willing to show us some projects, and maybe we can ask you some questions at the end. Grazie.
Yeah.
Grazie.
I just want to add for this project of never demolish, always transform, is to say that there is no lost situation. There is always positive in any situation. And the thing is that we have to see it and to change our eyes to see things that everyone reject or could see them as ugly or and this is our role also to do that, to look at things and to find the positive in everything.
Thank you, Anne. This is really shining, I would say. Prego. Thank you.
Okay,
so now we share the screen and we will start the presentation.
Okay.
Non, parce que là, j'ai pas partagé.
Je passe une tranche. Page unique. Is it okay?
Do you see the full screen or?
Yeah. Go ahead, no. We see the presentation mode, but it's not full screen yet.
Okay, we can make it.
Yeah.
And now it's okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. No.
Yeah.
So I would say with this this image and the relation between inside and outside, and say inhabiting pleasure and luxury for all, and because it is really our objective today with this idea of inhabiting, not specially linked with flats or apartments, but inhabiting it's everywhere, in the streets, inside the flats, inside the libraries, inside the museums, inside the universities, or inside the offices. This relation of space between inside, outside, views, air, light, for us, it is always inhabiting for all, and the pleasure and the luxury has to be for everyone. And the strategy, it's about what is essential for us. And we come back to this idea to to use the less as possible. It means to build simply. Build simply. I have in mind when I was in Africa, my first house, and then it was just planting some branches in the sand. It was bending them to make the form. It was covering the vertical part with a certain kind of straw, and then it was completing it around these branches, placing another kind of straw on the roof in order to avoid the rain to go in at the rain season. And then the project was a sort of straw hut with a little door to go inside, with a fence around, and then with a sort of hangar with 9 branches in the sand and a roof on top of it. So this was the first house in Africa. It was in 1985. And for me, this idea to work with the village close to the place and to build this space in 3 days, it was this idea of a sort of maximum pleasure with a minimum effort, with a minimum materials. But this, it's also, if we are really attached of the idea of modernity, and we find the same approach in the case study house program, these social housing programs of the 50s in US, that was also using the less material as possible and to just confront it to the relief, to the landscape, to produce some of the most beautiful villa of the West Coast in the US. So this idea of extreme simplicity that propose some qualities and modernity. But it is also a sort of modernity that is linked with also very simple gestures. I also have in mind the sliding panels of the Villa Katsura in Japan that are also in the same time extremely ancient, but in the same time extremely modern. And we want to work with these elements to propose pleasure, to propose quality. So it means to build simply, it means that to come back to elements. It is about making grounds, making floors like grounds. For us, still the example of Maison Domino is still important. It is how we can deal by columns, by beams, and by floors to produce a system with a stair that allow you to go from ground floor to first floor and then to the roof. And there is no wall. We really fight against wall. Today there is walls everywhere. Walls at the borders, walls everywhere. It's a sort of constraint by walls, and we want to open the space. So for us, it is a minimum necessary, a sort of skeleton that is able to produce ground. So, and then with this organization of grounds, we have to deal with this question of air, light, climate, and we think it's important to play with climate and not to fight against. Today, everything is defined to fight against the climate, and we want to work with the climate and to filter the climate, to work with it, to play with it instead of fighting against. And for us, it's a very interesting reference to it can be the greenhouse of the 19th century, the botanical gardens, but it can be also the horticultural systems that are developed for salads, tomatoes, etc., where with extremely simple systems, just by natural ventilation, by filtering, by leaving the air coming inside and going up, we can work with the sun, take the warmth of the sun, filter when there is too much sun, make it totally dark if we want to make it dark, but to work with this kind of generosity of the climate instead to fight against. And just to adapt below these systems the possibility of inhabiting. So by working on the ground and working with the climate, I think it's nearly enough. It's nearly enough to produce some spaces that are interesting to inhabit and to create beautiful views from inside to outside. build double because we really think that it is important to give capacity with less materials, with less energy, with less money. It is important to build 2 times more than a standard system, to propose more possibilities of choice, more possibilities of freedom for any inhabitant. So it was the question of the Latapi house that you see here from the garden, to say that for a family that has just the minimum budget for the cheapest house, at this time it was 60 square meters for something like 60,000 euro, it was possible, instead of 60 square meters, to say with the same budget, it is possible to build 180 square meters. So that was the interesting point in the Latapi house. And what was for us extremely important in that project, we understand really what was the position of each of the, what is a client, what is an architect. And we never tried to say you have to your life has to be like that, or this was extremely clear. So we tried to understand what was the very precise dreams of the Latapi family, but we never tried to live in the space at the place of the Latapi. And on their side, they never say we have a sort of we can like this architecture or not this architecture. They just say do what you want as architect, and we will do what we want as inhabitants. That was so clear that for us it is always in our mind. And then we see that the greenhouse that we imagine would be filled with palm trees or tropical flowers. It was in fact much better when they use it by placing all their furniture inside the place. And it's also interesting to see that the greenhouse placed on the east is probably the space where they spend the longest time in their day, in the day with all the family. So the space that is considered as no good for inhabitation is finally the one that is used the most. So with all the furnitures that they placed inside and that produce a very interesting situation, and the view from the street, where we can see that the facade is not only something that is always the same all the time, but can change in function of the seasons, in function of the mood of the inhabitants, in function of any situation. So a dwelling must offer the inhabitant opportunities to move around. So it means that we look for more fluidity, more mobility, not to be blocked at the end of a bedroom, but to be able to go through the passage to a balcony, to turn around. This idea of extending mobility to create more freedom of use is very important. All rooms then have large doors opening to outside. Facility of moving by inside or by outside as a house on the same level. It means also building larger, twice more, building double with the same cost as a standard dwelling to be affordable for everyone. So then we come back to this idea of beam column constructive system that allow flexibility and economy. So no walls like on the drawing on the left, but no these black walls, but an open system with columns and beams and floors that will offer a sort of more capacity, more possibility of adaptability, capacity of evolution, and also affordability. Also about the insulation. We don't want on the left the system that will propose a lot of insulation, but we prefer a system that it is as efficient and more efficient, which is to play with a double skin, a sort of winter gardens that will offer the quality of a winter garden in winter when we have some sun and we want to warm the house, but also that will, when the winter garden will be totally open in summer, will provide the shadow in order to keep freshness in the house. So it means that with these systems, by developing floors, by developing climates, it is possible to invent a situation of villa, even inside the cities. Inside the city, it's no more flats or apartments, it is villa at every level. Our aim is then to redevelop in the cities this concept of villa, houses with gardens. Instead to be outside the city in sort of peripheric situations, we believe that it is possible inside the cities to have a same system as villa. The idea of luxury is therefore redefined in terms of generosity, freedom of use, and pleasure. The project of Mulhouse, collective social housing project in Mulhouse, was very interesting because the challenge of the client, who was a social housing company, was to say, after 20 years of making the same standard, I want to try to develop some new situations. And they say it creates a project that he called Cité Manifeste. That was a sort of blank card in order to do, okay, I have a very, very strict budget, the budget that I have as usual, but you can invent something different. And we can see, we were with 4 other colleagues, Jean Nouvel, Shigeru Rouban, Mathieu Poitevin, Duncan Lewis, and we make the project. On each plot, each team has to work with 12 apartments on each plot. What we try to propose it is to densify the system, and we say instead of 12 flats, we will work on 14 flats, 2 more, but these flats will be much bigger than the standard ones. So it means that it is interesting for us to develop this idea to waste less ground by making more flats, but in the same time to work as these flats should be 2 or 3 times bigger than the standard. And what was important in the discussions we had with our clients, it was to say, okay, but if you make a flat that is 2 or 3 times bigger than the standard, how I will rent it? It will be too expensive. And we say, but it makes sense at one moment to say a building, a flat could be rented in function of its cost. This is a normal procedure, it seems, between 2 people. Okay, I build this, the cost of the construction is that, and then I rent in function of that. And the client agreed. So it means that it was possible then to make flats that were 2 or 3 times bigger than the standards, but the rent could stay the same for the inhabitants. That was very, very important for us. And you can see here the system, which was in fact just making grounds with a sort of skeleton of concrete, creating a sort of table. And on top of this table, it was possible to place a sort of professional greenhouse that was giving the climatic conditions for living inside. Then the apartments were much bigger than the standard, 165 square meters instead of 100. And the cost, the rent, was exactly the rent of the standard. And you could see this freedom, this capacity of space, of movement, and the search for light, the search for extra space, and relations with inside and outside. With the same client, 15 years later, it was exactly the same question that was asked again. And in another part of the same city, it was possible in a denser situation to create the same kind of apartments, like you see here, with winter gardens, with curtains, filters for the light, that would offer the same qualities of living, of moving, of freedom, and relation between inside and outside. For us, it is very important. This idea that you are in the city, you enter in your flat, you close the door, when you open the entrance, and then you go to the window, you go to the winter garden, and you see the landscape again, you see the sky again, and you see the place where you were walking 5 minutes before again. This idea of possibility of escaping is for us absolutely essential in any project that we work on. To build with, it is to say that we have to take in account the situations, the existing situations. Most of the time, perhaps 50%, 60%, or sometimes even more, 90% of the rich elements are already there. Like here in Cap Ferret, where we were close to the Bassin d'Arcachon with this fantastic view on the Bassin d'Arcachon, this lake close to the ocean, and where the challenge was to build a house without cutting the trees, without erasing the sand dune, just placing it in the landscape and in the situation. So then you can see what clearly we add to a situation of the sand dune, situation of the trees growing, the pine trees, and then this mixing of structures between the steel structure and the wooden structure of the forest, all together that create a situation, also taking care of the light coming from the lake by reflection, and giving this possibility to live with these precise situations through between the trees, the trunks crossing the house, and giving the feeling that you are part of the forest. So it means building with what exists, taking care of each root, taking care of each branch, and being extremely careful with all of them to produce the situations where then you can stop for a while in your armchair and just look at that situation. So building with is extremely important for us. We believe really in the modern architecture, but in the same time, contrary at the modern movement, that very often as make a sort of tabula rasa, we really want to work with the existing to be extremely delicate and precise with what exists already and take it in consideration. And it can be for any situation. It can be in a very beautiful place like the one we see before, but it can be also in the places that people don't like or want to demolish. And here again, I think it's very important to go precisely inside the apartments, to know the situation, to work with the people, with the climate, with the trees, with everything that is already there, with economy, to do more with less. Because in France, since more than 15 years, there is a sort of national policy that says that these blocks have to be demolished. And we don't believe in that situation. With our friend Frédéric Druot, since 15 years, we work and we try to defend an alternative of that, to say it's a bad decisions to demolish these blocks when they could be transformed. Actually, there is so many people asking for a flat, and there is a difficulty to build these flats. So it's very much more important to work with what exists and to transform it than to demolish. It's also much more economic. So we don't really fight against this situation since now more than 15 years, and we try in any situation to propose other possibilities like the Tour Bois le Pret that you mentioned just before. And we call that plus. Plus, it means that in any situations we have to add. We have to reconsider the existing, we have to solve the problems and to complete and to push each situation to the maximum it could have. So I will show you in that sense the project we have finished recently in Bordeaux, which is called the Projet du Grand Parc, that we have done with Frédéric Druot and Christophe Hutin. You see far away in the horizon these very long buildings that are part of the social housing of the Grand Parc, that they were built in the 60s. You can see here more precisely, and you can see here these three buildings, 1, 2, and the small one here. It was 530 families. These blocks were nearly abandoned since 10 years, even if there was no vacancy inside the apartment. Every flat was occupied, but the conditions of living were bad and difficult. And the only changes that have been made on these buildings was to repaint the facade from outside with this kind of brown colors, but in fact, it never changed the quality of life. So the plan was to demolish them, even if they were totally full by families. So 530 families in that blocks, and we proposed to that alternative, not to demolish, but to transform and to add. You see here the existing situation. And it is precisely that point, not to see anymore these blocks like that, but to see like that, to see that you have 2,000 or 3,000 situations from inside with so different rooms, so different decorations, objects, furniture, etc., that there is a sort of richness here that we want absolutely to keep and to work with. And the addition on the facade, so to keep everything what is inside and to add these new winter gardens 4 meters deep in front of each flat in order to give this extra space for every family, as it is when it is finished. But more in detail, the process of transformation. So it was like that, with extremely small balconies, and not for all apartments, with these strange colors on the facade. And you can see here the transformation. So here it was one flat looking at the facade of the next one. Here we can see the building before transformation. We can just see on the lower part the beginning of the foundations, the columns supported by foundations. Then these prefabricated elements that were lifted in front of the facade. All these facades were placed in front of the apartments, while in the same time all the inhabitants could stay inside because no one of them wanted to leave even for one night from this existing situation. And then step by step with their own foundation, they were fixed on the facade just for stabilization. Then new columns, like a sort of very large scaffoldings that will be a definitive scaffolding, definitive structure, placing it in front of the facades, the old balcony, as it is from outside with the new structure that has been placed in front. Inside the apartment, the inhabitant was still there, and we just place this wall with openings, circle openings for 2 days, just to prevent some dust and some asbestos that was in the joints of the windows. On the other side, the workers were opening the window and transforming a window into a large passage, taking away the blocks of concrete, making the passage, taking away the box, finding the space of the apartment behind, placing new window frames and new transparency, and then the possibility for the inhabitants to have to see and to live in the transformed apartment with new qualities, with new freedom, with new possibilities. And it is incredible to see that after 2 or 3 days, immediately new furniture, new light, new plants were able to be placed there. So it gives this kind of climatic insulation, this kind of climatic temperate situation that also gives the possibility to have a very, very low energy consumption and change of economy of energy. In the same times of these works with the new winter gardens, we have new electricity, new bathrooms, and new elevators to totally transform the building and give it the conditions for a very interesting new space. So you can see some images from outside, and finally, all this transformation from inside creates a new image from the outside. It was also possible on top of this building, on the fifth, above the 15th, at the 16th level, to place a new situation of flats, like a case study flats on top of the roof, that were creating a new situation for new inhabitants. And here you see the situation that where some new families could have a sort of fantastic view towards Bordeaux, towards the city. Case studies on top of social housing, but also social housing flats there. It is this research of light, this research of simplicity, this research of working with existing situations that is for us so important. Escaping. So the project was done with no rent increase, with people living in staying in their flats, and by spending 2 times less money than situations where we would have demolished and rebuilt the building. I will leave Anne continue on the next project.
So continue with this strategy of essential. It's also built or do not build. And this is, I will not extend too much the explanation because we already talked about this project in the previous discussion, but it's this square in Bordeaux, Place Léon Aucoq, where we were invited to make a project of renovation in the frame of a large program of the city to embellish the squares of the city. We were really impressed in visiting the place for the first time. It was not really in the center of the city, but and we were impressed by a kind of beauty already existing and the kind of quietness. And immediately we have this intuition that changing the pavement, making a new design for the benches or new lamps would not bring more to the quality of the space. So we studied carefully. We came several times studying carefully all the elements of the square. And finally, as it was explained before, after the 4 months we had to work on this project, we came back to the city and we said, at the question of how to embellish the square, our project is to say the square is already beautiful, and our project is to do nothing except a little works of maintenance, so that would bring more the square more clean. But it's important to insist that it's not a lack of the intention. It's much more to say, no, here it's better to do nothing. So we'll build almost not. So again, it's the project that we mentioned before, the Palais Tokyo in Paris, and this is the original project built in 1937 for the Universal Exhibition. And this project was two museums at the origin. It was not a pavilion, but it was a commission shared between the city of Paris and the government, the state, to make a contemporary art museum. But the wing of the state knew more chaotic history, and in the early 90s, that was the situation inside after some works of demolition and the project which was abandoned, and we were invited to apply for a competition to do this project for temporary metamorphosis to introduce there contemporary art center for the young creation. So that was the situation that we found, which was absolutely fascinating to see the space and the quality of light, and how the architects did this great work of making various spaces with always the light coming inside on a different way, sometimes from the roof, sometimes for large windows, very long perspectives. But in a way, this situation was never seen by anyone, because the inside was much partitioned to have the different rooms for exhibition. So this was at the same time very impressive, because all this appeared very weak, very fragile, all these light structures. And as we explained before, our project was to use the budget we had, not to transform the building, but to create the condition that the space could remain open, flexible, with all these qualities, but also ready to invite events. So this picture is the section of the Fun Palace that we also evoked before, and for us this was an interesting reference, as the space very open, very flexible, which offers from the ground floor to the top floor a maximum of opportunities and freedom for artists, but also for the visitors. A place never definitely partitioned or fragmented, but always ready and open for new occupation and new events. And this idea of flexibility to provide with a state which allows all situations and the possibility to occupy the space, but always to return to the situation that gives the maximum freedom. So, and it's what we did. We just cleaned a little bit. We reintroduced the electricity system, heating system, elevator, staircase, fire security, all what was has been destroyed, and that was which was missing, to reopen in good condition this space. And it was done in first stage, and in the second stage more recently. So now this space offers 16,000 square meters for exhibition, plus another something like 18,000 for offices, workshops, but also the atelier for the curatorial team. But all these pictures that that comes from a series of exhibition that happened since 2000. 2002, that was the reopening, shows how it allows many different situations of various artists, but the space doesn't create constraints, but always give the opportunity to define the specific environment of every exhibition expected or wished by the artist. Here it was an exhibition from Thomas Hirschhorn, which filled the space with all the tires. And this building, because of these 4 levels from the ground floor to the last floor, with just all different atmosphere, creates all this different condition from the basement, which is dark and allows all these video presentations, to the top floor, which is only under a glass roof. So that was the project that we proposed for this. Built double, again, because for us it's always a goal that we aim in designing project. It comes from the idea that the programs are always the result of negotiations, and they are always very restricted. And for us, it's important to this idea that beside the program, we aim to give the same amount of free space, of extra space, which gives the opportunity to expand the life, to expand the use, to create appropriation. And in this combination between the program space, which has the constraints, which has this definition of certain uses, and the extra space, which is free of use, free of program, we really trust in this combination of space. Buildable means also to do it in the same budget. It's why it's also a way of designing that give importance to a very careful design of the structures of everything, and to avoid any complexity which has no interest for the space or for the quality of use. So these 2 examples to conclude this lecture is one is School of Architecture in the city of Nantes in France, double space and program space to invent use. It's a school for 1,000 students, which is built in a new big neighborhood in the former industrial island in the city of Nantes. And in this place, where there are already many public space, outdoor public space, for us it was more important to create a huge capacity, because the School of Architecture is more than a school. It's a place, for us, it's a place open to the city, creative, participatory to the city, the place of the knowledge about the city and the territory through the big amount of studies which are done every year inside them, a place for public debates and events about architecture, urban planning, landscape, arts, society, and a School of Architecture is the right place to do all these debates and to mix education but also discussion. A place for invention, but also a School of Architecture is can be understood as a laboratory in itself of space and uses. So here we decided to use 100% of the right of building. That means much bigger than the program expected, twice bigger. And in fact, the program is has the same amount of extra space to allow this quality of appropriation and use. So the building is a very simple. It's a huge structure made with a series of columns and floors with a high potential to load on them, 10 meters by 10 meters. This is a grid. And also that the height and the ceiling, the idea is not to create floors, but grounds. And it's why the height between every ground is quite high, because in the idea of rebuild on this ground. So the principle is to create many ground floors, which allows to use this the structure in different ways, but also to create the conditions of the transformation and the reuse in the future. So here, this is the kind of skeleton with 4 levels, and the ramp, like you see here, is running along the long sides to lead very smoothly from to every floor by walking, by bike. But also, if necessary, with a car or truck to bring materials on these big platforms. So this prefabricated structure, which allows to provide this huge space in a quite economical cost, and make this extra space affordable in the former budget. So the standard prefabricated elements allowed also to build fast, to build clean, because all the products, they came from the factory and they are just placed in the construction. And this is an intermediate state where the structure offers this maximum potential that we can imagine that it's ready for many possible uses. So the first occupation is a school of architecture, but we can imagine that later it could become something else. And today it's something very important to also think the condition of the transformation of the buildings later. So the structure that we provided, and inside the structure, what you see in red, it's intermediate floors, which are light floors built on the structure without any need of reinforcement of structure, neither foundations. And this is a program of the School of Architecture. But this can be also deconstructed or removed or changed for another function, or to change the way the school is used. So as you see here from the left, it's the structure, the platforms, and on the right, it's the occupation by this light structure for the functions of the School of Architecture. But the white remains also for the use of the students and the professors. So some views of this construction. Here you can see the intermediate floors coming into the structure, as well as the auditorium. All of this can be deconstructed. And here it's a section where you see the proportion between the program space in green and in blue, it's an extra space, which has also different conditions of climate, which is the intermediate space, like a huge winter garden. So the ground floor is 9 meters in the ceiling, and the other floor are 7 meters in the ceiling. So when the ramp, which is running all along the long sides to lead to every space. So the ground floor is widely openable to communicate with the public space, to expand the potential of use. Here it's the big atelier for building models, or which are directly connected to the street. So it's possible to come with lorries and bring material, or to build large structures, or also organize events, concerts, which are today organized by the 16 association of students who propose always in events or interventions like a fashion week or dance festival or anything. So the auditorium is open on the square, and it creates also, in addition to the education space, also a space for shows or for theaters or lectures. And this extra space, like here, which is not a classroom, it's open to the use, but also it must be negotiated between all the users how to use it, and when it's used to return to the position which allows the maximum potential. So it's open to the city. The students makes many different uses. And this ramp, which is also public, it means that it can be used also by the public to go to the roof. So the full use for workshops or festivals or sport, in addition to the basic education. So this is one studio of design project, but all these terraces are generated by the ramp, which are also the place for appropriation. So this principle of platforms of grounds is for us very important, because it brings another dimension to to the space, which is more than a building. And the roof, which also potentially a square where a lot of events can happen, like here outdoor cinema during the summer. All of this is organized by the students in the framework of their course or their studies. And this is also the opportunity for the school to welcome outdoor activities and to participate also to the city. So I think we can stop here because we already said a lot, and thank you very much for your attention. And I don't know if there is questions now, but we can also take time for questions.
Thank you very much. I think this was, extremely generous because it's not easy to give lectures in these conditions. So we really thank you. I don't know if you really want to take questions. Qualcuno vuole fare una domanda? My question would be not really a question, but I think it's relevant because Jean-Philippe earlier in the night said that you don't like walls. Yeah. And after we've seen all these projects, basically we hardly have seen any walls. So the statement is carried literally in the project. I think this is one of the most beautiful things we saw. What would you say about that?
It's strange because we really fight to avoid voids, to avoid walls. And by the fact, it means that we don't make windows.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it is some just openings from one ground to the next ground that open totally and open to a winter garden or to a balcony. So it is this kind of a building that has no limit, and we really like that. We really enjoy to think of space like that, like if you come inside the situation by entering in a building, by taking some stairs or some elevators, by going to a flat, but after that, going back to the light or going back to the view higher of the city you were some moments before. And I think this for us is very, very beautiful, very interesting. And so this idea of the continuity of being open, not to be defensive. It's incredible to see how the society in its architecture, but also in the design of cars, for example, these last 20 years has made more heavier and heavier situations. Very often the buildings are looking as little windows in a sort of prisoner situation. Yes. And we really want to find the freedom of the space again.
So involuntary prisoners of architecture in that case. I have se qualcuno vuole alza la mano io smetto, se voi non l'alzate chiedo io. One last question on my side would be, you didn't show the project in Morocco, but how does it feel? You're French, you were born in Morocco, you're doing this project in a very strange, specific time of reflections on our histories, the history of Europe and of the rest of the world. What's the feeling of working and building this building in Morocco, working there?
Senegal.
Yeah, Senegal, sorry. I did a building in Senegal too, I have to say.
No, I think for us, what is we have always been. Myself, I didn't live in Morocco, neither in Senegal. But when we have Jean-Philippe was born in Morocco, and he told me very often that his interest for architecture came from this city, which was extremely modern. and our interest for the modernity probably comes from this the visiting these cities, and Dakar in Senegal is amazing for that, because you can find very pure buildings, very interesting buildings. And for us, what was interesting in building in Senegal was to find to not to do the same, but to show that the reinterpretation of modernity is possible. And the reinterpretation means that we keep only the best of the modernity, and which means the facility of the ground, the openness, the something which is easy to live, large spaces with openings, balconies, which make just a shadow on the facades, and allows to create just a good ventilation when you open windows. All this very easy gesture that makes and it's not too simple to see that. It's something which is really essential, and that we don't want to forget. And it's what we are interested in the modernity. It's on this former intention of the modernity to break the standards and the codes of constraining architecture. And building in Senegal was the opportunity to push these ideas very, very far, and also to find a way of building that we cannot do anymore in Europe, with all the norms, with all the standards, with all the security, but building with minimum material which is needed, in not to take risk, but just to give more place to the space.
Okay.
So, and it's also something that we aim for, that when we to calculate at the end of the construction what is a part of the solid and what is a part of the air. And
Okay.
more we have air, more we are happy, because it's also the air, the space is also what is given to the users. And we trust a lot in the capacity of the inhabitants, of the users, to do something with the space. And it's always for us a permanent concern to know where we have to stop to design, to let the place to the use. And it's amazing how much we are surprised by the creativity and the invention of the users when you give them the conditions to do this their own appropriation.
Grazie.
But
Philippe?
just to complete, it is clear that we very often refer to the modern architecture, but in fact we love a lot the historic, the architecture of the past, and we like the continuity of the city. We like that each period has produced a certain architecture, a sort of system of layers, and we like these superpositions. We like this mix of all these, each one keeping its identity. And this is what we like when we can see the history, the traces of the city. And it's also why we never want to demolish anything.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a question. C'è una domanda?
Chiedo a loro direttamente, sì. I would like to know if in the Grand Park in Bordeaux, which was the main difficult, both in the construction process and also with the regulation of the city. I mean, when you say to double the space, I mean, it's also to add value to the properties. So if this bring any struggle or whatever.
Yeah. About the regulations, what is interesting in this kind of double system, it is that in fact we just add 4 meters more. So it means that we don't build any more road or more street or more network of electricity, etc. We really stick very to the existing. So we really are really interested by the fact that we should not waste any of the outside ground and try to keep it as natural as possible, just by a sort of little addition to existing situations. One point that was interesting, in that case, it was social housing. So it was social housing company. So it's people renting some flats. And what was very important at the beginning, it was to say, there is a sort of general economy. It is about the economy of the city. Actually, in France, what we are fighting against is the fact that some of these buildings, they could be demolished, and we have to build new buildings in order to keep the inhabitants with the same number of flats. And this is extremely expensive. So we really believe that we should mind about the economy of the city. So by spending 2 or 3 times less money, we can say there is no reason to make the rents higher, because in fact we spend less money. And then the discussions with the inhabitants was to say, okay, we will improve the quality of climatic conditions, we will reduce a lot the energy consumption, and in fact what will stay, it is exactly the former rent and the former energy consumptions will be exactly the same as the new rent and the new energy consumption. So there is no additional cost for the inhabitant. And it is possible because, in fact, we spend less money for the community.
Yeah, maybe one of the part of the question was also if the city had to change the regulations to include your project or not.
We cannot say that. In fact, the problems we met are, as usual, even when we construct new buildings, they are always difficult to solve. But we cannot say that there were more difficulties in doing this transformation than in building new. Okay. So what is important is to anticipate all the questions. But I think in this case, we compared to Tourbois-le-Prêtre in Paris, for example, we had not really problem with the city regulations. Okay. The problem were much more technical, okay. Like, for example, the issues of seismicity, how you deal with an extension of buildings. And this was a hard discussion between us, engineers, insurance, and finally we arrived to define the right solutions. In Paris, in Tourbois-le-Prêtre, one of the problems is that from the period of the construction, the ceiling of construction has been reduced, and if we have followed the regulation, it was not really possible to make the extension on all the stories, but only 10 stories on the 15. But the city, of course, understood that it was not very clever to do that. And it turns out it was also a period of possible modification of the rules. So they changed the rule to allow all the existing buildings to follow this. But it's very important to anticipate all the problems, and anticipate problems is not only architectural or technical problems, but it's also taxes, political, social, and all of this. But we cannot say that it's more difficult than building new. And what is also important is that on this project, the fact that we do the project while the inhabitants stay inside is quite important, because it's, in a way, it represents a kind of catalyst as well as a protection of the building. So okay. It seems to be a great difficulty, but it's also a great advantage.
Oh, it's interesting. It's like in Italy, it's like combining two proceedings that are now allowed in Italy. Just one is with this piano casa, which allows you to increase some percentage of your space. And there is this new law, which is you get 110% of what you spend to improve the climatic energy. And so if you put these two things together, probably we get to your project. So you anticipated this amount. Grazie. Any other question? I think you were really generous, you were really nice. I also thank the people. It's always a challenge to attend this lecture with the mask, with everything. So grazie, we love you, and we hope to see you in presence as soon as possible. Ciao, grazie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
See you soon. Ciao. Grazie, grazie infinite, grazie per la pazienza e la dedizione a tutti. Grazie.